Sacred science is a revelation of God through science.
So when Einstein made his discovery, then you have a whole series of scientists that follow. You discuss them in order, and it's real easy to follow. One of the things up front, though, that changed the course of these studies is that all of these parts of the cosmos were developed with traits embedded within them already. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Well, of course, and it's always surprising to me that so many people of faith don't believe in the Big Bang. I read the first sentence of Genesis, and I think I read it there. But it's hard for humans to comprehend the amount of energy that was released from something smaller than an atom, something smaller than a grain of sand, enough energy to create what today is an ever-expanding, almost unknowably large universe. And the contents of the universe are just almost beyond our comprehension in terms of the numbers of galaxies, stars, asteroids, comets, etc. All came from a speck and the release of enormous quantities of energy. Photons then could collide and create the basic particles, I will call them. A particle that is unfamiliar to a lot of people called the quark. And quarks came in two different flavors, up and down. They could combine in teams of three to create protons and neutrons, the nucleus of the atom. That went on then, and I'm always fascinated by what created the first star. In the first 20 minutes, enough protons were created to fuel the shining of every future star. And those protons flowed out into space-time, clouds of protonic gas. And after quite a long period of time, gravity shaped these protons into dense, round balls. And then the nuclear forces took over. There's a strong force that holds two protons together, and there's a weak force and a little W particle. It's one of my heroes. A little W particle scoots into one of the protons, knocks one of the up quarks to a down, and makes a proton-neutron combination called deuterium. Does it again and creates a proton, two neutrons called tritium. Deuterium, tritium fuse, create helium, and give up 0.07% of the starting mass back to pure energy, multiplied by c squared. That's the shining of the sun. So that to me, again, is planned. I give credit to God for the W particle, and I think it's simply astounding and fun to realize one little particle goes streaming out with the protons with a mission, and that is to light up the first star.
And I think you say in 27 minutes, it was all created.
Actually, in 20 minutes.
In 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you look at the people who've studied through this, who are two or three of your favorite scientists and their discoveries that you'd like to highlight? Are there a couple, three? There's so many in your book. We can only take two or three.
Well, I've already mentioned that Newton was the first scientist to express his work in a mathematical equation. And he alluded to reading the thoughts of God. And I'd have to pick him as number one. Einstein, of course, there's probably none to excel in terms of his contribution to science, to our understanding of space-time. Newton thought it was flat, that time was immutable, and Einstein demonstrated it was curved, and that time and distance were variable. The theory of relativity demonstrated that fact. So I'd have to give Newton and Einstein my favorites in terms of the scientists that have given us the greatest insight into creation.
In more recent history, you have the Genome Project, or the Collider, and you have the Hubble Project. Can you highlight what was happening?
I'll give you my next favorite. And I think one of the most important moments, I'll say the most important moment. A scientist named Peter Higgs looks at an equation on a piece of paper, because they didn't have mass at the time. They built all these colliders back in the 1950s, and they were colliding particles together and creating this theory of particle physics. And they didn't know where any of these particles had mass. You have to have mass
Yeah.
to be physical. And they had no idea where it came from. Peter Higgs looks at an equation and he says, you know, if this equation really existed in the universe, it would imbue certain particles with mass. I think that's the greatest moment in the history of science, because then you have to ask, where does that equation spend eternity? From whence did it come? That takes you all the way back to Plato, into a theory of forms, to a higher dimension, and a library of mathematical equations. And you have to presume that that equation has existed in eternity. And Peter Higgs recognized, as the explanation of mass, why our universe is physical.
And that would have been present in those 20 minutes of creation.
In the Big Bang was a package. And in that package were 8 blueprints. And they all work together in perfect harmony. If you removed any one of them, we don't exist. It includes the interconvertibility of energy and matter equals mc squared. It included space-time. Really important, included quantum mechanics, and we could sit here and talk for another hour about the superposition and entanglement that was necessary to allow the creation of the first star. Those 8 blueprints work together then to build out the universe we live in now. And without one of them, we wouldn't have had the first star. Without the first star, we wouldn't have had our sun, we wouldn't have had our planets, and we wouldn't be here.
Another great discovery, of course, was the understanding of DNA. And those of us who have read about this or studied it for years, we know that Crick and his team, they literally stole some of the photos, and unfortunately, she didn't know that before she died, that's how they discovered it. But still, amazing discovery that they went over to the Eagle Pub and made the big announcement and all of that. I spent a lot of time at Corpus Christi College, Cambridge, and they're right behind there. It was interesting. The last time I was there with Christopher Hamill, a great manuscript scholar, we couldn't get the Wi-Fi to work. So here we are right next to where all that happened. This unbelievable discovery. We couldn't get a simple access to Wi-Fi. But what happened then has unleashed just rapid access to information. We were talking earlier about what grad students can do now that used to take decades.
Well, and the first genome cost $3 billion, took 10 years to complete. And one of the great stories of science has been the improvement in our ability to sequence. And I hope everybody understands that DNA is only 4 letters. It's ATCG. And the magic of it is A will only bind with T and C will only bind with G. That's called complementary base pairing. And we have 3 billion letters in every cell in our body. And incidentally, we replicate our DNA 1 trillion times a day. And the fact that that's ongoing is just amazing to me. But through the development of better and better what are called sequencing machines, today you can sequence your own genome in 24 hours and it costs about $100. And so scientists around the world are sequencing now the genomes of every plant, every animal, beginning to really understand the true story of how life pursued its journey and the relationship between different species. So we're living in a magical time when we can understand the story of life vastly better than we could have.
I agree with you.
10 years
Your
ago.
book does a good job, I think, through the illustrations, especially here, where it shows the positioning of the different parts of DNA and all the angles that come out of that make it possible just through the 4. I thought that was very helpful. And how also we know which parts of those are present in the prehistoric animals that have been found.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how that informs the present?
That's always one of the great mysteries, is how did the ancient bacteria, the first form of life, come up with the information molecule? Even more, the molecule that generates energy. It's a fancy molecule called ATPase. And ATP is the magic sparkler that lights our muscle movement and sparks our thoughts. And we create 110 pounds of ATP every day. And ancient bacteria came up with that technology. And that's always a deep mystery to me. And I feel like it has divine implications as to how the original life could energize itself. So we were both gifted on this earth with DNA. As Bill Gates says, we couldn't code today anything that sophisticated. And then the ability to generate energy. Of course, plants were busy doing it through photosynthesis.
Right, right.
And we're busy doing it through respiration. And the complementary there, photosynthesis generates oxygen, respiration generates CO2 that's used by the plant. So plants and animal life have helped each other together to advance themselves.